Hello, hello, Usama. I think you're here, but your camera's not working.
Yeah, for some reason it went off. I think probably a restart for the computer might fix it, but I think this is not the time to do that.
It probably is. I think people want to see your face. Why don't you leave and come back, and I'll talk about something else in the meantime.
Okay, let me try then. Okay.
Okay. So I'll talk to everyone else for now. This is a new mini series we're starting. How to de-indoctrinate yourself. We're starting with the fear of hell. It's kind of the main thing that people complain about, but also other things like misplaced guilt, feeling guilty for things that you don't even believe are wrong, and a thousand other things, potentially infinite things. Um, it's a mini series because I'm sure it's going to fill up more than one episode. I have a bunch of stuff already planned and tons of slides, a couple of videos, and a website to show you at the end of all that. And then we're also hoping to have at least one person or as many as you guys want to come on the show to let us help you de-indoctrinate yourself, to help you do these ideas that we're going to be talking about. We'll be giving links on how to do that, and I'll be posting all over the place. Wherever you found me before, I'll be posting there again. So let's see. Osama's still not here yet. I had him reboot his computer. Okay, so I gave everyone a little bit of description on what we're going to be doing here, and I guess I don't really want to do it again. Your face wasn't there, but that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
We might as well get started then.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Let me take off this banner and put on the first slide and put our faces this way. I think this is better. So, by the way, I'm sick. I might be sneezing and coughing.
You do sound a little bit sick.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't get in the way. I'm drugged up. The normal drugs and new drugs for the sickness.
Maybe it's punishment from God for wanting to talk about this blasphemous topic.
Oh my God. Okay. I wasn't thinking about that. That's
Well,
a
that
theory.
that's the type of that's the mentality, the mindset that you would have thinking about these things. Maybe God did that to me, punishing me for
And
whatever.
that's actually what makes a lot of people return to Islam.
Yeah, that's definitely the case.
Yeah, we should get into that. Let's try to stay on point here. So I it's hard for me, first of all, to even help people with this because I never had a fear of hell. But I have had things that I needed to de-indoctrinate myself from. But it's not the hell thing. And this is about how to de-indoctrinate yourself, but we're leading with the fear of hell concept. You did have a fear of hell, so you can speak more to this from experience than I can. Did you have something to say?
I mean, there's plenty of things to say, but eventually, the same way that your experience was somewhat different because of whatever path that you had in life. Same thing for me, same thing for any other ex-Muslim who is going through this kind of journey of starting with whatever it is that you have in your childhood and then having to re-examine this at some later stage once you gain intellectual and emotional maturity to actually be able to face some of the more irrational things that you have been indoctrinated with
Well,
the child.
you brought up something that I want to touch on a little bit more. You were kind of saying we're all coming from a different situation. So what that means to me is things like you can't just copy someone else's solution.
That's definitely the case. However, if we really take this to the extreme, that would mean we can never actually say anything meaningful to someone else. And that's actually contrary to what we're claiming right now. We're claiming
Right,
that there are certain things that
right.
at least there is a kind of a common denominator that we can work
We're
from.
going to teach some general concepts and methods that can help you regardless of what the details are. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. And by the way, please do interrupt as much as you want. I'm sure every interruption you can think of is going to be a good one. And even if it's not big deals, it doesn't harm anything.
Well, actually, I think given the fact that we are coming from two different perspectives, I think there's going to be a kind of a complementary approach to how this might be thought of.
Yeah.
And the discussion itself is then going to be enriching.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. Where I thought to start is how other people talk about it. The people that claim to have a fear of hell, they're ex-Muslims. They say they don't believe in Islam. They even go into details. And I think the reason they go into details is so that people don't reply about that. You know, they're asking for help about fear of hell, and they spend a couple of paragraphs saying, yes, I get Islam is fake. You don't need to explain that to me again. Help me with the fear of hell. And they use words like overthinking, not all the time. They sometimes use psychiatric terms like OCD, and there's at least one or two others that they also mention, which I can't remember right now. What I hope isn't happening is the people who claim, hey, I have OCD and that's why I have some of my problems or whatever. I hope they're not also using that as a crutch or more of a self-fulfilling prophecy or of a thing where, hey, I can't change because they're, OCD. I imagine there are people doing that. Hopefully, in general, people are not doing that. But anyway, this sidesteps all of that. What I explain in the next couple of slides is overthinking. The concept of overthinking even doesn't make sense. It's similar to like Islamophobia. The concept is nonsensical. Overthinking, the way they're trying to describe it, if it was a real thing, it's like thinking more than necessary about a topic, or thinking more than what was needed, or thinking more than what was good, or you know what I mean? More than something. What's the something? They don't really specify, and everyone's upset too. They're also saying, I'm upset about this overthinking. By the way, when we talk about physics, if somebody spent an extra hour studying for physics for a physics test, nobody would use the term I was overthinking. Okay? Or maybe that's not even a good example, but let's say a specific physics problem. You came up with a solution. You think it's right because you don't see any problems with it. You don't see any reason to believe it's wrong. If there's an overthinking scenario there, it's okay, you spent more time trying to figure out if you were wrong, but then didn't get anywhere, and you just did a double check or a triple check, and it's still the same conclusion. Is that kind of overthinking? Well, here's the thing. Nobody's upset about that. Nobody's having emotions about that. I'd say there's just wrong thinking. If you're thinking about something when you should have been thinking about something else instead, that's what I mean by wrong thinking. I get into details next here.
Let me make a couple of comments about what you just said. The first thing is probably the idea that people might be using this as a kind of a crutch and having it as a kind of self-perpetuating thing that, well, this is something like OCD. It's out of my control. I'm not going to be able to have any control over it. My own experience and what I have seen in others, especially people who have left religion a long time ago. For me, this process started about 30 years ago. So I've been through so many different stages along the way. What I wanted to say is that this type of fear in the intensity that you carry right after you leave religion is untenable. You cannot actually sustain it for a very long time. It's probably something that characterizes a transitionary period, I mean, it's not going to go away. I'm not saying it's something that would magically go away, but it's something that could atrophy over time. It's not something that can sustain itself. If it's
There's
sustained,
fresh wounds.
I'm
There's
sorry.
fresh wounds.
Yeah, exactly. And so if it's sustaining itself for years, this person probably has more issues that need to be dealt with. It's far more than just leaving religion, and it's something much more compounded.
Okay.
I'm I'm not a qualified person in any of the issues that are related to
Neither am
psychology.
I.
I'm just speaking
Yeah,
from
I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know what other ologists there are.
Yeah.
My background is in physics. Okay, just like the Sam, like education background, like school wise.
But also we have a background being Muslims, so we do have some real actual life experience that comes to the table
Yeah.
from a perspective that many other people wouldn't be able to have. But at the same time, we're not talking about this from a professional point of view, from the point of view of people who might be talking about this as qualified psychologists who have gone through various qualifications or courses that actually would be required here.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start explaining to people. And by the way, I'm pretty sure I learned all of this from psychology sources. You know, my first psychology class, I did take a psychology class in college, one class or two, I think two. And that was way back when I didn't really even know what's like. I mean, I was a Muslim back then. I remember kind of not seeing it as important. I remember they used to throw on labels of mental illnesses, and I never understood. For one, they didn't really explain what the labels are, what it is. Like they'll throw out labels, but they won't say what it is. And how are you going to know what the hell they're talking about when you never experienced it? Or here's the thing, maybe you did and you don't even know how to connect them.
Right.
You know, there's, the first time you have anxiety and you don't know the concept of anxiety, you probably can't pinpoint the word anxiety or the concept with that thing you just experienced.
Right.
But later when you learn the concept and maybe you watch a movie and you see somebody have some anxiety and you look at that, it's like, I've experienced that. I know what's going on there, or a version of it. Because of course there's like degrees or complexity. You can't boil it down to like one little thing or a name. So what I want to say here is thoughts are or can be habits. Of course, if you just had a new thought, it's the first time ever, that can't be a habit yet. But if you have the same thought repeatedly and it's in the trigger form, like it gets triggered, like intuitional gets triggered. That's what I mean by a habit. An example of that would be, let's say you hear adhan, and then you think, oh, that's adhan. There's the sensory input, which is the actual adhan noises, and a baby wouldn't recognize that. A baby who's born yesterday doesn't know what that is. But me, as somebody who has some triggers in my brain, habits, links up that sound with the concept of adhan, and that links up to a bunch of other things, what the purpose of adhan is. And then for a lot of other people that are still stuck in the hell that we're talking about, the fear of hell, they start having other triggers happening also in combination with that. Like, and I bring it up later, but what if Islam is true? What if I'm wrong about everything I've been thinking? Now they're already hyperventilating. Oh no, I'm going to hell. And then now they're having a panic attack. And it was a bunch of habitual thoughts and emotions popping up, each one causing the next one in a chain reaction. That's what I say here. It can cause a chain reaction. And it's a chain reaction in the sense that at no point did you sit down and think, what should I think next? The part of you that isn't the automatic intuitional part of you. Cat says I made it for once. So let's see. Let's go on to the next slide here. So what I say here is this basic thing. People who are having this problem, they already know Islam is wrong. They can already tell you reasons why it's wrong. they're capable of saying it's refuted and have some logic behind it. At least partially. That's what I say here. That's at least partially true. The fact that they made it this far, even to become ex-Muslims, means they have some good reasoning that helped them get this far. But what I say here is, and I don't know how to say this is every case, in at least for stage one, part of your problem is your epistemology. I'm already throwing in words I should be defining first. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. It is how we know things. The phrase I love using the most is the scientific approach. Because if it's not contained in there, well, it should be. Right? Anyway, that's a different topic. We'll maybe do that some other day. Your ideas about how you judge ideas, that's your epistemology. And that's the thing I'm saying is partially good that led you out of Islam, but it's still partially wrong. And that needs to get fixed in order to, well, fix your overthinking problem. So I give 4 examples here of things you're doing wrong. And it doesn't have to be all of these. You could maybe get one of these right and get the other ones wrong. So you don't fully know how refutation works. You don't know how evidence works. You don't know how probabilities work. Probabilities in relation to theories. You know, the idea that we say this theory is more likely than some other theory, that concept. And then falsifiability, the concept of falsifiability and how to use it, they don't know that either. As an example, a lot of ex-Muslims think that if something's unfalsifiable, that means that you can't say anything about it, or it means that science can't say anything about it. And that's not.
And even worse, they would give it a kind of an elevated status that makes it more sacred, more. So, for example, I've heard so many people say, "Well, this is not something science can talk about." And then all of a sudden they say, well, then this means that it belongs in the realm of religion, which for some reason they give a kind of a higher status than science, not realizing that religion itself is actually a way, a primitive way of knowing the world, a pre-scientific way of trying to know the world that is mixed with mythology, with all sorts of components that themselves should be subjected to scientific thought.
And here's part of the point, you know, the guy who came up with the concept, as far as I know, is Karl Popper. And when he said it, he was saying, look, unfalsifiable means you throw it away from the start. It's a myth. That's what it means. You're either doing, okay, the idea is you want to work on scientific theories, because if you have a theory that isn't even scientific, then you can't even work on it. So it's already, you throw it away from the beginning, you know? And what he was trying to do was differentiate between science and pseudoscience. And there was a lot of so-called scientists, they claimed to be doing science, but they weren't. And their theories weren't not scientific. We call them now pseudoscience, or in the terminology of Feynman, I would call it cargo culting. Even though,
No, I was going to bring up one pertinent example here to the idea of falsifiability that comes from Bertrand Russell, who was talking about this imaginary pot that is, I don't know, in orbit around the sun somewhere where you can't actually detect it. So he placed every kind of precaution in defining it that you're not able to detect it. And that's analogous to the way that you have this idea of the hiddenness of God, which makes it so impossible, so elusive to actually formulate it in a way that's falsifiable.
And the spaghetti monster is the more famous one, as far as I know. The spaghetti monster. It's behind the moon. Have you seen it? I'm just kidding. You can't actually see it.
Can you or can't you?
I don't know. Okay, anyway, let's get serious again. Okay, now, suppose you fixed your ideas, your epistemology ideas, your ideas about how to judge ideas. even once you fix that, it's still not fully habitual. You still have a bunch of ideas in your head that go against this new epistemology you learned. And what needs to happen is your two sides of you needs to talk more. You know, the part of you that is the more like the, okay, if you think of yourself as two parts, the conscious and the subconscious. And the subconscious is the quick, intuitional, gives you answers with no time at all. And the conscious is the very slow, but you're controlling it person, you know? The idea is, even if you fixed a bunch of ideas consciously, well, you haven't brought them into your subconscious yet. They're not intuitional yet. You have to make them second nature. And that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort. Time actually doesn't mean anything. You could do no effort, and infinite time won't help you. You need a bunch of effort, very, very detailed effort. Like, you have to notice contradictions between your intuitions and your conscious ideas. And then you have to deal with that contradiction. You have to integrate your mind, you know, and that would take a lot of, well, I explain later how to deal with that. So I guess I explained habits enough, where you can have the correct ideas, but your habits are still messed up. Now the environment issue. Your habits, it helps to understand evolution. Genetic evolution, we understood first. Mimetic evolution, we understood second. By, I don't know, genetic evolution was what, 200 years ago?
About that.
Okay, well, mimetic evolution is only like a few decades old. I think it was Richard Dawkins. Yes. And then it got advanced significantly, I believe, with David Deutsch and his book, The Beginning of Infinity. Some basic thing to understand here, and you will hear this from therapists, counselors, those type of people. When you're trying to deal with some, I don't know, very sensitive topic you have, something you can easily get triggered by, what you do is you take yourself out of the environment, and then those triggers that you have won't trigger in this other environment. And the reason is those triggers, those habits, those ideas evolved in that specific environment, so they only work in that environment. And they don't do well in another environment. This is true of genes, and it's true of memes, at least one type of memes. And it's not universally true, because there's plenty of genes and memes that work well across a broad set of environments, okay? But a lot of genes and a lot of memes only work in one very narrow environment. So get out of that environment and it doesn't work. I think I've spoken way too much, actually, because I explained this in another slide. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself a lot. In my next 3 slides, I go into each of these 3 sections in more detail: the ideas, the habits, and the environment. And if you see here, I carried over some of the text. You see it in gray. The black is the new text. So I've coined this term, the Islamic Mental Framework. So when somebody becomes an ex-Muslim, okay, you've changed a belief or even a set of beliefs. You no longer believe Allah is God or that Muhammad is the messenger. But you didn't change the way that you generate ideas or the way that you hold beliefs. I call it the Islamic Mental Framework, to give it a name, because we give a name to our other thing, right? I give a name to the scientific approach. So we should give it a name. It's a method of acquiring knowledge or holding knowledge or claiming knowledge, because there's very little of the knowledge in this case. So the way the Islamic Mental Framework works, Islamic Mental Framework works is you always hear them say something like they'll lead by talking about a prophecy, and they're trying to make you in awe of it, and then they stop. It's like, if prophecy true, therefore Islam true. That's the logic. That's the Islamic Mental Framework. In this framework, notice it doesn't say anything about flaws. It doesn't say anything about the other prophecies that didn't come true. It doesn't say anything about anything else. It only says, be in awe of this idea that you can't immediately refute in 5 seconds. Or because it's unfalsifiable, you can't even refute it by the normal means. So the only means to refute it is to say it's unfalsifiable and reject it for that reason. But because the Islamic Mental Framework doesn't have this logic, it's telling you the opposite. And by the way, the opposite is very old and has nothing to do with Islam. It goes back to Aristotle. I wasn't even planning to go this far back in history. Aristotle said, I guess I should go this far back. Before Aristotle, there was Socrates, right? It was just Socrates. Plato comes third. Yeah.
Well, Socrates, Plato, and
I had it wrong. Okay. So Socrates and Plato, as far as I know, they didn't say anything wrong. They also didn't say much, but they said a lot of good things. They talked about, fallibility. The famous saying by Socrates is, I know that I know nothing. That sounds weird. What he meant was, and we didn't have those words back then, so he couldn't have done it. We have better words now. I fallibly know that I infallibly know nothing. So he has fallible knowledge, but he doesn't have any infallible knowledge. So to give it an example for people what infallible knowledge would be like, if somebody says, I know God is real and there can't be any way that I'm wrong, that's them claiming infallibility. Even though really God is the one that claims infallibility. And he clearly says humans don't have infallibility. But somehow people jump this, make this leap. I have infallible knowledge. So what Aristotle said was, well, how can we be sure of what we know? That's how he asked it. How can we be sure of what we know? And he answered with this. For me to be sure if some idea is right, that means it had to be founded on a foundation of some other knowledge that we know is right. But that leads to an infinite regress. I can show people if you don't believe me. It goes, you can't actually finish that loop. It goes forever. He was, and notice too that this, if it's not already obvious, do you see the connection to the Islamic Mental Framework? Islam is true, and I can be sure of this if there's some other idea I have that I know for sure is true. And in this case, it's Islam is true if I know that there's a prophecy that I know is true. And again, like I said earlier, Aristotle's logic ignores any criticism, it ignores any rival theories. You don't have to consider, hey, maybe there's another explanation that also accounts for all the evidence.
So I might follow up on the way that Muslims might be thinking, or any kind of system of thought that has a mythological component that requires you to suspend judgment. You basically have these walls around those sacred ideas, but these walls are basically generic walls that get erected right from childhood. You have certain things you are not supposed to question, and so you end up with these ideas that are taken as is. You're not supposed to think about them. You're discouraged and even disparaged if you were to question them. And they end up being these ideas that appear inscrutable or beyond human ability to understand. Now, what happened in the recent years is that there has been a kind of a clash between that way of thinking, the typical religious way of thinking, and the more open-minded way of questioning things, of looking critically at things. And there was a counterattack or a defense by the Muslims themselves, who started bringing up ways of rationalizing those ideas and bringing them in a way, or presenting them in a way, that appears to rely on logic, on science. Of course, it's very precarious, very tenuous. It's so contrived. You can easily see where the issues are. But modern day Muslims try to present Islam as a rational way of thinking, and discourage this way of conceiving of it as if it were this purely irrational set of ideas that people get indoctrinated with right from childhood.
So they're kind of saying the Allah knows best logic is rational.
Yeah, and it even gets rationalized because you mentioned Aristotle. Muslims, like Christians, they love Aristotle.
Oh no.
They love Aristotle totally. So
Maybe that guy really was trying to squeeze in God.
Medieval philosophy, both Christian and Muslim, relied so heavily on Aristotle, and I would even say that there has been a crippling effect of Aristotle, even going into physics.
I would say it touched physics too. I'm surprised by. I was gonna say every field in general, but even physics. Tell me how.
Well, I can give several examples. For example, okay, let's think about gravity. Aristotle said that gravity works because a rock is Earth, and it has a tendency to go down towards its element, which is Earth. So thinking about gravity in terms of
I thought you were going to say that. So I misunderstood you. I thought you were going to say even in physics they got some wrong ideas because of Aristotle's wrong idea that I explained, not this other wrong idea about gravity.
Let's give credit where it's due. Aristotle brought a lot of really great ideas. I mean, formal logic, the way that
I'm sure he did. Yeah, I saw a little bit of what he did. He did add some good knowledge on top of Socrates.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a really wide breadth of ideas that he brought, whether it's in what we call today physics, natural philosophy, in logic, in politics, all sorts of things. Yeah, well, debates to some extent, but you might go back to Plato here with the way that he quoted from.
One of the earliest things I learned about debating, and I was already an ex-Muslim, so I'm 32 plus. Okay, I came from the physics world, science world, not the debate culture world. The lawyers or the want to soon be lawyers, people that go to debate club to debate each other. I didn't understand what the hell they were doing. I was drawn to math class and chess club and stuff like that. I don't know if that makes me different for that reason. But after I became an ex-Muslim and I started learning philosophy, I learned from, it was either Plato or Socrates, this basic concept that one of the first errors that people make, and the first rules, don't do it, is make a personal attack on the other person.
Yeah.
It's so simple. I remember seeing that. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then you go online, it's like, that's the thing everyone's doing wrong the most.
Yeah.
First lesson, the first rule of the ancient Greeks. Let's see here. Couple other points to mention. The ex-Muslim who fears hell is also the person that goes to, let's say, the ex-Muslim subreddit and asks us to debunk miracles for them because they don't know how. And what's the other example I give here? Oh, if I noticed the people that fear hell and overthink about the what if Islam is true question, I noticed they are not good at working with a thought experiment, hypothetical. We do things like, hypothetically, suppose there was a God that had feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, how would things play out? And then you could have the same conversation with four different features. Have the same conversation again with. So that's the kind of thing we do. We do it in physics a lot, but you need to be able to do it in anything, not just in physics. And that's what philosophers do. That's what Socrates did, stuff like that. So one of the things that comes up, if there was a God, well, he wouldn't do evil things. But they can't get past that little point because they're already stuck to, well, that God, Allah, and the way it was told to me, they're stuck in that framework. And they seem to not be able to, for a few minutes, think about this hypothetical that we just came up for them. You know what I mean? They can't separate the two. It's more of they don't have a practice in doing it. Go ahead.
Here's the thing with if you look at the text of the Quran, it's basically a jumble of ideas, and so you end up with so many things that are contradictory, so many things that are so clearly written independent of another piece of the text for a specific situation, and so you end up with a lot of contradictions, including things that are attributed to Allah and the way that he's supposed to be interacting with humans. And so the idea of that, the idea that he might be evil is not actually one that can be precluded completely from the Quran. It's just that people right after the death of Muhammad did not actually go into this. It took a while until people started debating this and coming up with ways to rationalize. And so the problem here comes in the form of not only talking about some kind of an irrational idea that you instill into kids about hell, about the nature of Allah, and things of that sort. You also have this other mechanism, this set of ideas that has been developed over so many years and honed in a way that sits in with the irrationality of the original idea, and yet at the same time has ready answers to address the doubts that would naturally appear when you start thinking outside of that box of the set of ideas that you are indoctrinated with. So you start thinking for yourself, but at the same time, you had so many people before you doubt, and the fear of hell, the fear of doing sin has forced them to come up with these irrational ideas, with these rationalizations of the irrational ideas to make it so that your doubts would go away. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle that has been built and tuned over a very long time, and that makes it very hard for people to escape it very easily.
Yes, but the aspect that I'm focusing on here for this little bullet point is they don't already have a skill of being able to do a thought experiment. And by not having that skill, if you were to try to do a thought experiment with them, they would get confused and they would take their current beliefs into the thought experiment and not realizing they're doing that. They don't know how to separate ideas. We're going to help people do that. And this is what philosophy work is. This is also what physicists do. When any theoretical physicist is trying to come up with the next theory, everything you're doing there is a thought experiment. You're not talking about how anything works in the existing theories. You're not talking about. This is what happens when you're sick.
Yeah, maybe some drink of water or something.
That's what I've been doing. Where was I going with that? Coughing makes my brain reset too. I guess we can go to the next point. So the other things they don't know how to do is they don't understand the role of evidence in anything, the scientific approach. They think evidence is provides a support role for theories. That's not how it works. I know people do use that term support for evidence, but they actually they're using the word incorrectly. They also use the word corroboration. So if you have a physics theory and you have an experiment and you haven't run the experiment yet, but depending on the way the results are going to go, it's either going to refute the experiment or not refute the experiment. And the not refute the experiment case is what they call corroboration. And it's what some people try to call support, but it's not support either. I don't really want to get into the details of that here. I just want to say that real quick. If you're still getting that wrong, that's part of why you have trouble with the God theory, is because you're not understanding how evidence. By the way, a quick example for a murder case, because people understand that better. You'll find that all the defense lawyer needs to do is come up with another theory that also agrees with all the evidence. Like somebody else committed the murder, or some other non-murder thing happened, but resulted in the same damage to that skull. You don't need. Here's the point. The existing evidence in the murder case, it's not supporting the murder theory. It's just not refuting it. And all the defense needs to do is come up with another rival theory. And of course, you can't have two. Both theories can't be true. Only one of them can. But all the evidence agrees with both of them. All the evidence does not refute either of the theories. And then that's how the defense lawyer wins, because we don't put him in jail for that. If that's not making sense to people, please mention. Did that make sense, Usama?
It does make sense, but that might be going into things that. When people arrive at the issue of a fear of hell, they have probably already examined to some extent, to various degrees of depth, ideas about God and God as an explanation of various phenomena and so on. So they might be able to overcome the irrationality of religion, which is represented by the idea of God as a creator, God as what's responsible for explaining nature. It's beyond that when you come to, you have that idea that what if I'm mistaken? What if, like to use the example that you just mentioned with the murder case, what if the other example that incriminates me is the one that is true? It's that irrational thinking that has an emotional component, which does not actually include thinking about the evidence itself, but thinking about what if I'm wrong?
Well, here's the thing. I don't even think that question is irrational. I think how they respond to it is irrational. So the question is, what if I'm wrong about Islam? Okay. Well, you should answer it. So there's many ways to answer this. You could say, well, what it would mean is that I'm wrong about every one of my criticisms about Islam. That's a tall order. There's 10,000 things I know wrong with Islam. So for Islam to be true, and for me to be convinced about it, because obviously that's part of it. And I know they're thinking, what if Islam is true and I'm not convinced? But I'm bringing it back in, because they let it go. They detached the two issues, and I'm reattaching them. I would have to be wrong about every one of the flaws I see in Islam. That is such a huge thing. That's such a huge thing that people are not considering when they even think of most people that think the question, what if Islam is true? They're not thinking of that thing I just said, the 10,000 flaws you know about. What they should be thinking instead of, or in addition, is second, once you think, what if Islam is true, before you have a panic attack, ask this next question. What would it mean for Islam to be true in relation to all the criticisms I have about Islam? That's a better question. And anyway, the question alone is not irrational. About probabilities, you hear people say things like, what's the most likely scenario? Or they do a multiplication. They say, well, what's the most likely theory about God? But then they also multiply that with what's the risk if you're wrong? And since Islam has the highest risk factor by like 1,000x because of how long you're going to be in hell, then they multiply it with the, let's say each religion is like 2% likely to be true, 2.1% likely to be true, 2.2%, it all adds up to 100, right? Has to add up to 100, I'm pretty sure. But then you multiply each one of these by the risk level of what would happen to you if you get it wrong. And most of them are like, have a very small multiplication factor. But then Islam has a huge one. And then that's, the logic they give. Go ahead and explain it to people.
Right.
They say to kids.
Yeah, but let's not give Islam the biggest probability if you just want to think about that from the point of view of probability. Because if we want to think about hell, you also have the Protestant hell, and the typical way that people view it is that it's also an eternal hell that's going to be torment, whatever you understand by that torment. Because some people say, oh, you're not going to be in the sight of God and it's not going to be fire. Well, it is torment of some form, and it's going to be an everlasting one. So there are religions that compete with Islam
in how strong the risk is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not saying it here too much, but it's wrong if you're still thinking that theories have likelihoods, or that it makes sense to judge theories by how likely they are. Then that's part of, and if you still have a fear of hell, then I recommend fix your epistemology. Well, real quick, what happens when if you ask the question, which theory is most likely? The reason you're doing that is you plan on not looking at criticism. Because you're saying, well, if this theory is 51% the likely one, and it has the highest probability compared to all the others, even if it's by a little. But then let's say you did find a criticism that rules out all but one of them that was supposedly the least probable. Why do probabilities matter then?
Well, there's a nice way that has been put forth by so many people that are believers trying to dissuade people from leaving religion, which is the famous Pascal wager. So what if I'm wrong? What would I lose if I were just throwing myself into belief, going to the religious ceremonies, and just in case, even if I have doubts? That's actually a very problematic situation, whether you're actually treating it within the same religion or saying, well, what if the other religion is true? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be also doing what the Christians are asking me to do? What about the Hindus and the Buddhists and the Jews and all these?
Maybe if you do 2% of each of them, then you'll have, it's kind of like when you're playing the lottery. I don't play the lottery, by the way, but if I was to play the lottery, I don't think I would put all my money on one number. I would let's say I pick 10 different numbers and do 10% of my money on each of them, because you're pretty sure you have how do you say that? You don't have any confidence in any one of them more than the others.
Right. And the whole idea of the Pascal wager is actually one that is actually very deceptive at rock bottom. That you're saying that there is some kind of an omnipotent, omniscient God who knows everything, and then you're coming to that God and saying, well, I'm just believing just in case I don't actually believe. Is that a real tenable situation from the perspective of religious people?
No. That means you think you can lie to God.
Exactly.
What the fuck does that mean? he can see us masturbating, but you think you can lie to God? Anyway, let's go to the next one.
I'm seeing a lot of things going on in the chat. Seems that things are lively there.
Yeah, there's somebody that invited us to his live stream to ask about Islam. Anyway.
Yeah, because we landed from Mars, we have no idea what Islam is.
Also, we didn't ask. By the way, we have technically 7 minutes left. I say we do at least one more, maybe even 2 more slides, and then we do housekeeping and then start ending the thing. So I talked about ideas. Now I want to talk about habits. So even if your ideas were right or like good enough, because you recently just learned them, let's say, you still got to make it habitual. And that means things like you're going to notice policies you have, habits, thoughts, emotions that are really consistent with your old epistemology, and they contradict your new epistemology. And it takes work to figure that out. It's not like an obvious thing. Although as your intuition with this gets better, it becomes like automatic. It's automatic for us. Like, it's very easy for me to see a contradiction between 2 sentences because I've done it so much. Like I can take a sentence and without paying attention, I'm converting it into its general form. I do things like, I'll break a whole, let's say there's a big long sentence my kid said, and I'll say, you should do X. And X had 50 words in it, but I shortened it to make it, you know what I mean? Like that, I'm doing that kind of stuff all the time. That's what people need to get good at. Anyway, your overthinking is wrong thinking. So as an example, you hear the adhan. At this point, it's just your ears getting sensory data. There's no interpretation yet. The next step is you have a trigger, and that's your subconscious brain saying, oh, that is adhan. And for a lot of people, the next trigger is they think the question, what if Islam is true? They're now doubting all their knowledge that they have about Islam. And then a series of triggers, which they call overthinking or a panic attack. And there's a lot of emotions in there too. And the idea is you need to retrain yourself so that you can deactivate some of your triggers and replace them with other triggers. Triggers are just habits. There's good triggers, not just bad triggers. Okay. So step 4 can be replaced. So step 3 is, what if Islam is true? Step 4 should be, well, go answer that question now. Don't have a panic attack. Answering the question is the kind of thing that I said earlier. For Islam to be true, that means I'm fully convinced that all my criticisms of Islam are wrong. So now I'll review all my criticisms of Islam in my Google Doc. By the way, if you have a problem like fear of hell, you should have a journal where you're talking about your fear of hell.
Yeah. I wouldn't only say journaling. Journaling is great, but the fact of the matter is that there are so many people who, after deconverting, have been going through the same thing and finding communities that have people of the same mentality, and talking to them explicitly about this is actually very therapeutic in itself.
Yeah, I do. I don't know. I don't know if you said this thing here, but people have now been starting to do this thing where you're journaling, but you're actually just posting on Reddit. So like public journaling. And that's even better than just private journaling. It can have downsides, of course. But it has plenty of upsides because you get to see what other people say that you wouldn't have heard if you just wrote it in your private journal.
Yeah, but from the point of view of therapy, just getting that out and verbalizing it, and especially if you have some feedback from other people, whether it's in the form of journaling or in the form of joining communities that would be providing feedback, that's actually wonderful.
I want to say 2 other levels of feedback that is just you. If I say something out loud with my mouth, my ears hear it. But if I only said it in my head, I didn't get to hear it. That's already one level you lose. Your own, that's why people might think we're crazy, but these people don't understand. If I'm talking by myself, I might be practicing a conversation I'm going to have with you later. I'm not a crazy person.
Yeah.
And saying it out loud, I'm doing that with the conscious intention of letting me hear it and hear my own mistakes. The other part is when you write something down and later you go read it, that is far better than you just remembering an old thought.
Yeah, that's true.
It's better. It makes it easier for you to criticize your own thoughts. A lot of people have a negative opinion of even the concept of criticism. But forget the word criticism. Analyze. You can analyze your thoughts better if you wrote them down already. So let's see. The next one, environment. I already started talking about this. I was explaining, if you understand evolution, and you understand how ideas evolve, how genes evolve, how memes evolve, they evolve for an environment, in an environment, and they don't work outside of that environment. So one way to help yourself, if you're getting triggered a bunch, you're getting panic attacks, fear of hell, panic attacks, take yourself out of that environment. You might have trouble because you have parents thwarting your attempts, but I heard somebody say they put on their headphones and they're listening to music instead of to adhan. That sounds amazing. Yes, do that kind of stuff. Of course, again, your parents might be stopping you, but you might figure out ways to get around them stopping you. Moving out of the city, moving out of the country, yeah, that'll help a lot. Getting away from all those things that triggered you before. There's so many things that can trigger you. A smell can trigger you. My grandmother's perfume triggers my mom in a certain way. She remembers a bunch of things about her mom when she smells that perfume. Partly because no one else had that perfume, something like that. If you see a picture's face, that can do it. If you see a picture's face, if you see a person's picture of their face, that could do it. And when you people have to realize they designed Islam to be this way, to give you constant fucking reminders. Yeah. They want you to say, what is it? After everything you do, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. After or before, right before you do anything, I'm doing this in the name of God and for Him. Like, so every action, come on, that's them trying to stick the concept and remind you every moment of the day, and you have to take yourself out of that environment. So one thing you could do to change your environment is watch some comedy. And even better if it's comedy that makes fun of these things that we're scared about. So there's ex-Muslims now doing comedy, and some of it's really good, man. I have some I want to show right now, I think, even before we end this episode today. But before I get into that, I want to talk about all the various ways to change your environment to help yourself. So one thing is you can speak to someone that doesn't have your same fears. It would help you a lot if you speak to someone that doesn't have a fear of hell, especially if it's an ex-Muslim who doesn't have a fear of hell. If you're talking with someone that also has a fear of hell like you, that might be reinforcing your fear of hell instead of making it better. It doesn't have to. You guys could still theoretically end up helping each other out of it.
It would depend probably on the intentions and the stages in which both parties are in. It could be harmful, but it could be very therapeutic.
It could be, yeah. But to make it easy for yourself, try to find someone that doesn't already have a fear of hell, and that whole big part is easier.
Well,
Um,
if you look at other religions, because you knowing other religions would also give you a different perspective that there is hell in other religions, and that would mean that you can actually see what you have for what it is. It's just a story that has been invented within your own culture.
more than that, I would say two additional things. Your own fears and your own ideas that are causing your fear of hell, like we said, are not the same as everybody else, okay? So, yeah, go find somebody from another religion who has a fear of hell and discuss it with them. That'll help you see the bullshit in the Islam version. But even if you just take another Muslim and their fear of hell, or there used to be, like you used to have a fear of hell, you're going to have different flavors and different things that you were worried about and different things that cause you to have the fear. Those differences are going to help you see, what's the word I'm looking for? Even using this word is going to confuse people. Most people don't know this word. Parochial. When you see that some of the stuff in Islam is parochial, like it's very narrow, not universal, doesn't apply really to anything besides itself. But when you compare the fear of hell for Islam with the fear of hell for every other religion, and you kind of put it on a chart, and you start marking off, okay, so this version of fear of hell has this feature, but these three other religions don't have this feature. And then you start seeing it on a grid. That's going to help you understand a lot better. You start asking yourself questions. Well, why the hell did these people make it this way? And if you still think God did it, why did the God make it that way?
And there's even a bigger thing to notice when you're actually making a comparison of that sort. You should ask yourself, why is it that I don't believe in these other hells? The fact that you don't actually believe in those other hells and that they are supposedly as real as yours should have you reflect on the reality of what you actually believe. Seeing the comparative religion is actually a really wonderful way of realizing the amount of silliness and ridiculous aspects of your own religion, because there are analogous features in all religions, and comparing them makes it very easy to see.
Yeah, and this goes along with what I was saying earlier. Like, people have trouble with even doing a thought experiment. The thought experiment here that you can do is, what if I was born in a family from another religion? How would my life have played out?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thought experiment to do. Because, by the way, the answer is, well, I would have been of that religion.
Yeah.
And I would have feared that guy's hell instead of this hell.
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm pretty sure the people that still fear hell haven't done any of these things. Or they did a little bit of it. They're not there yet. Another thing I thought of recently is, and then I Googled, there are games that have God, religion, afterlife in there. I think playing a video game like that can help people, because it's kind of like running a thought experiment, except it's the game creators made the thought experiment, letting you play in it. I think that was very good. So a couple things left I want to do before we get off today. We agreed that we're going to have a section every episode of some housekeeping. So I say we do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I also want to do the one little comedy bit. Okay, let's do the comedy thing first. All right? We're just going to watch one thing. I'll put it on right now.
Shout out to all the teachers that told me I never make it. I just like to repeat stuff that rappers say. Like, that makes me feel good. But my teachers legit did not believe in me. Like, I went to a Muslim school. Like, I went to an Islamic private school. And I told them that I wanted to do comedy, and they'd never even heard of that. So they're just like, no. No. You want people to laugh at Muslims? I was like, yeah, kinda, yeah. I had another teacher who was also the imam. He was like the religious leader, and he found out that I wanted to do comedy, and he took me aside in like a private moment, and he said, "You want to be a funny guy, huh? You think this life is funny, my friend? Fun and games? When you see the power of Allah on the day of judgment, brother, you will not be laughing." And I was just like, I'm still gonna do it. It made me want to do it even more so that I could be like all the rappers that I looked up to, you know? Like I did have teachers that did believe in me, but that's not good for my narrative. So I like to just focus. I was listening to a Meek Mill song one time, and in the middle of the song, Meek Mill goes, "To the teachers that said I wouldn't make it here, I spend a day with you, make a year." And I heard that, and I was like, I'm gonna flex just like that as soon as I get on. And then I became a comedian, and it's good. A little hard to flex, though, to be honest with you. Like, what could I even say to the teachers that said I wouldn't make it here? I'll make a year what you make a year. Like, that doesn't sound as good. You didn't believe in me, and now we're roommates, dumbass. Good job. Yeah. He told me I was gonna starve in front of the whole class. I remember. He said, "You want to be a comedian? You're going to be very hungry, my friend." And I wish he could see me now. I'd be like, "Bro, I've never been hungry a single day in my life because I still live with my parents, asshole. Did you think about that? No, you didn't. I'm never hungry. My mom cuts me fruit all the time. And then she brings it into my room because she has zero boundaries. She just walks right in. My mom's sick, man. She's a Muslim woman. She wears a hijab. I don't look very Muslim, like just off look, so nobody ever bothers me about it, you know? She wears a hijab. She looks Muslim all the time. One time she told me a story. Yeah, it's like a Halloween costume. She looks Muslim all the time, you know? So one time she told me that she was driving around and a guy pulled up next to her in traffic and saw that she was wearing the hijab, and he like flipped her off, and then he like followed her in his car for a while. And I was like terrified when she told me this. I didn't want to ask her this question, but I asked. I was like, "Mom, have you ever like thought about taking off your hijab?" And she was like, "Malik, I would rather die a martyr than let those people change me." I was like, "All right, Tupac, fucking relax. Jesus, chill out. Don't talk like that. Don't wish a motherfucker would. That's exactly the opposite of what I wanted. She's nuts. Crazy talk." But I was proud of her. Like, I don't want her to change anything about herself, but I want her to be safe. So it's like, what do we do here? You know, like something's got to change. Society is not going to change. So it's like, we got to figure something out. What I'm thinking of doing is coming out with a line of hate crime proof hijabs that my mom can wear. Completely hate crime proof, okay? First one, I'm thinking standard, just Confederate flag hijab. Because listen, that's gonna short circuit. Nobody's gonna know what to do when they see that. Next time some guy pulls up next to my mom in traffic, he's gonna be like, "Oh." She got us. She wore the piece of cloth that we like. This is another one. This is a prototype. I don't know if it's ready for the streets just yet, but all white hijab, but just a little bit pointy in the back. Just a little bit pointy. Not all the way, but just deceptively pointy, just for some peace of mind. I am looking for peace of mind, man. I've been going to a therapist for 4 years. I think it's a scam. At least I don't have a good therapist. Because I didn't like get referred like by a doctor. Like I just like went online. Like I just like Googled help. Please help. And then it took me to a website, and on the website it was like, write out a list of your problems so we can use that to like match you up. And I was like, all right. And I selected anxiety because that's what I was having. And then it was like, write out the anxiety, explain what that feels like so that we can use that to better match you up to somebody. And I was like, it's anxiety, it's not gonna make sense. But I was like, okay, I'm not as good of a Muslim as I was raised to be, but I still feel like a good person, you know? And I feel conflicted because in school, they taught us that everything is written before we're even born. Like all my decisions are made for me. So it's like, am I just doomed to make these mistakes that God wrote for me? Like what if Allah judges me unfairly? And then I submitted that. And then they were like, you should talk to Helen about this. Helen's good for shit like this. She's on top of it, trust me. And I was like, Helen, are you even listening to me? What is Helen gonna do? You couldn't have brought me like a Dr. Mahmoud El-Shabazz, somebody to just tell me to pray. Brother, your life is haram. Of course you feel terrible. At least he understands.
And you know,
I'm gonna be in a meeting with Helen. She's gonna be like, tell me more about.
there's Muslim therapists that do that.
Oh yeah. Oh, I can tell you actually about a whole industry in places like Egypt that have therapists supposedly trying to treat atheism, specifically for treating atheism.
Say that one more time.
After this wave of people leaving Islam, especially in a place like Egypt, where you had so many prominent people coming online and having a lot of online presence, there has grown an industry of therapists that specialize in treating atheism.
Wow. And yeah, so there's therapy that treats gayness, right?
Yeah. It's pretty much along the same lines.
So by the way, somebody just said, Sarah said, is the stream suspended? And I said, looks good to me. She said that it says policy violation.
It's possible.
Anyway, I still hope we have our video. I kind of don't like, I hope we're going to be able to put it up. I don't know. Whatever. We'll see. Let's keep going.
About this Allah character. He sounds toxic. I mean, why would you hang out with a guy like that? Who is he to judge you? And I'm like, well, he's the only one who can. So. And that's my therapist, Helen. I've been with Helen for about 4 years. And we get into arguments. Like, I'll fight with Helen because, like, she just tries too much, like, too new age of ideas. It's not practical. This is when I knew, like, I have to find someone else, is when she asked me what my astrological sign was in the middle of a set. Like, my therapist was like, what's your star sign? I was like, Helen, come on. We can't both be mentally ill, you know? It's gotta be... We're just two crazy people yelling at each other now. We don't need to be in an office. She's like,
so
Islamic private school.
Oh no, what happened?
And I told them that I wanted to do comedy. I was gonna say, if you walked in on your girlfriend cheating on you, you don't need to be like, let me see your phone. Unlock your phone. I can see the way this guy's hitting it from the back. You're lying. I can tell. There's no woke flat earthers. There's nobody who's like, the earth is flat, but, you know, I love everybody on it. We're all doing our best on this frisbee ride in space, man. That's traveling upwards to simulate gravity. We're all doing our best, and we got to pay attention because it's heating up. The disk is heating up. And the water's going to rise. It's going to pour off the sides. We got to be careful. People don't usually double up on causes like that. They're like, the earth is flat and there's too many Filipinos on it, and it's going to tip over if we don't find the edge that the Jews are hiding from us and push the... Like, who cares? He's a basketball player. It doesn't... He's not making the rules. Kanye was the same thing. That was tough for me when Kanye got in trouble. Because I've been a Kanye apologist my whole life.
Maybe I'll stop here. He's very relevant for American audiences. You know, he made a lot of jokes that I think only Americans would get. And really only Americans that are older and maybe more into music. Like I don't know. A lot of the names he said, it's like, okay, it's one of the guys who make music, or I don't know. All right, let's do some housekeeping real quick. So this is something in reply to one of our episodes where we talked about separation of church and state. And I didn't realize this, but this woman is saying that separation of church and state is built into Christianity. There's this verse that says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. I wonder, is that from the part that Paul wrote?
Well, regardless of this is supposed to be quoted from Jesus directly, so it wouldn't be Paul, but I'm not that much of an expert in the New Testament, so I might be wrong, but I don't think it's something that Paul wrote.
Well, it's definitely okay. Caesar didn't exist till when? What year was Caesar?
Oh no, there were emperors as such, and they were called Caesars then.
Oh, Caesar wasn't just one of them. I know Caesar means emperor, yeah, like czar.
Yeah.
Okay, so they weren't saying a specific Caesar, yeah.
Yeah, but I actually
We were mentioning Rome. That was the Roman Empire, and yeah, the Roman Empire was already there when Christianity started.
Oh yeah,
but the Roman Empire didn't. Well, I guess where Christianity started was Roman Empire land, Palestine, right?
yeah. I mean, the Roman Empire didn't convert into Christianity until Constantine, which was in the 4th century, 300 something. But there were precursors to that other emperors had sympathies with Christianity, so it didn't really come out of the blue.
So Sarah's saying the stream is back. I hope we didn't lose any video. That would really suck.
Yeah, I think probably we should avoid. It might be considered fair use, but they might say that this is copyright infringement.
Oh, I didn't even think of that part, that aspect. Okay.
But back to that comment, I actually tend to agree with it. I compared to Islam, what happened in Christianity is that even though Jesus supposedly is saying that he is emphasizing and reinforcing the authority of the Old Testament, in reality, Christians don't take it as seriously. And so you end up with a religion that has been divorced from that ancient Jewish heritage, compared to Islam, which has a completely different situation. It's basically married to that aspect as part of the religion itself. So
thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, that was the main point there. How Islam and Christianity are different. One of them is clearly saying separate from government, and the other one didn't say that at all, and it is saying we are the government.
Right, and I think this actually did help in a way for the Christian West to go into that process of getting rid of or minimizing the effect of religion in everyday life. That the idea of secularism is something that could emerge more naturally in a Christian world, but at the same time, if you really think about it, any religion can morph into anything. So if you go back to the Middle Ages, you can see that Christianity was really ruling the life of people in every aspect. So just the fact that he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, doesn't mean that this is something that has been consistently...
Oh, yeah. Because they could do the same thing to do with Islam, which is pick and choose the parts they like and ignore the other parts.
Yeah.
And add stuff maybe and make fake interpretations. All right, so this was in reply to our, I think, last episode. Yeah. Where we were talking about, the previous episode to that, where we were talking about Islam is subsiding, not just in quantity, but in quality. And this person mentions that things are going to change even more when people realize, and I'd like you to tell me if this is real here. He's saying there's information that Mecca never existed, and there's archaeology of the time that shows all the other places, but not Mecca. I saw this written somewhere else too.
No, this
by an ex-Muslim saying that that Muhammad didn't exist also, and that the story about him was made up afterwards, and almost all of it is made up.
Right. No, first of all, about Mecca, that's almost certainly the case that Mecca did not exist in the sense that that is promoted in the Islamic narrative at all. That is to say, it was not a commercial hub as they like to portray it.
And why would it be? It's buried in the fucking desert in a peninsula.
Well, the thing is that you did actually have the trade route that would go up the peninsula all the way through Petra and to the Roman Empire eventually, but that route wouldn't actually go into Mecca. It's the wrong place. That's from the perspective of the commercial aspect of it. The religious aspect, which claims was Medina the hub? No, it was not. It was known. So there is a Ptolemaic catalog of old cities. Medina was actually mentioned in it as an ancient place. So it was really an old place. It was known by the name of Yathrib. Mecca was not known. There was another place that is really hard to pinpoint that is mentioned there called Makoraba, but saying that it's the same as Mecca is very hard. And as far as we know, Mecca didn't really exist as a place until well after the establishment of Islam. It might have existed as a kind of a minor religious place in the peninsula, but it's definitely did not exist.
I hear similar things about Christianity in the sense that Jesus was made up, and for 300 years since supposed Jesus's birth, there was nothing written down, and it was all written down after 300 years. And then I also heard it about Judaism.
Oh, well, okay. So I have things to say about all three of them. In terms of Muslim narrative, we're opening a whole can of worms here. So in terms of Islam, there is actually a third-party narrative that gives an impression that yes, there was an invasion, and it seems to have been led by Muhammad, according to those narratives. So there is a very famous document called Doctrina Jacobi, which actually documents something of the Islamic invasion as they went into the greater Syria, and Muhammad is mentioned by the name. But that's not to say that what we know about Islam and Muhammad is the same as what's mentioned there, because there's a lot of inconsistency. For example, in that account, it says that the Muslim and the Jews allied themselves together against the Romans. So where is that alliance of the two working together? It's supposedly came after the issues that Muhammad had with the Jews in Medina. So there's some kind of inconsistency that shows, yes, the history was actually written well after the fact. In the case of Jesus, that's actually almost the case, but you also have other accounts like the account that comes from Josephus Flavius. That's a Jewish general during the revolt that converted or took the side of the Romans after they basically conceded defeat, and became a Roman historian and mentions Jesus in various places. Although some people question the actual phrasing, some of it seems to have been inserted by later Christians, but there's that, and there's a couple of other accounts that do mention Jesus. Whether he is Jesus of the New Testament, unlikely. He must have been some kind of a rebel leader that's
the first terrorist. No.
to some extent. So yeah, and when it goes back beyond that to Moses, to Abraham, to the people that the Jews revere, we're now going into a region where history basically turns into myth, and it becomes mainly speculation and nonsense.
So by the way, a bunch of people left right when we started the video. So I think that means they didn't get to see the video.
It's likely, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why they left. So now we know what to do for next time. Hopefully it stays in the recording. And I guess even if it doesn't, I can still try to squeeze it in. I don't know. I'll figure it out later.
From my own previous experience doing something like that, they would probably either take it down completely or would require you to post an edit that would excise it.
So let's give people a idea of what the next few episodes are going to be like. Okay. We had it like this. So there's a bunch more slides here. What, eight more? So we're going to be talking to people about not just the fear of hell, but the other issues that are related. So like fear of jinn. Okay. If you have a fear of hell and you have a fear of jinn, I don't even know if fear of jinn makes sense there, but belief in jinn. They're contributing to each other. So let's help them with all of it. But all of the stuff we're going to be talking about and that we've already talked about already helps with the jinn issue. And let's see. I'll be talking to people a little bit about what it takes to de-indoctrinate yourself. And I say it in a very general way here. 3 slides of something I wrote. Is this 3 or 2? This is one a Reddit post. And then I go into explaining what I did, how I left Islam, or it's after I left Islam. So you more like describe it, what I did after leaving Islam. That's what it is, not how I left Islam. Just explaining my history there. And then I go into talking about how to learn epistemology more and how to change your habits. I talk about journaling. We're going to actually teach you how to do it. We talk about therapy, not that we're therapists and we can't do therapy, but I've had therapy before. So I can speak about therapy from the perspective of a patient, what to do, how to go get it, stuff like that. Have you ever had therapy?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay. That's one major problem.
But again, that doesn't make me an expert in therapy because it's looking at it from.
Yeah, no one was saying that. But I'm also not an expert in how to be a patient in therapy. Like I'm not the best therapy patient. You know, I've done it a little bit, but I can speak to it about it a little bit. I know more than somebody who's never done it. One thing I have that a lot of people don't. A lot of people look down, or what's the right word here? A lot of people have a negative opinion about therapy or about needing therapy. You know, the old idea, and this was true in America too, but a lot more so in other places. I think America and Europe really normalized this. You know, it used to be if somebody offered therapy, hey, I think you should get therapy, their reaction would be, what? No, I'm not crazy. You're crazy. That's not the way to think of it. We all need therapy. You know, the way I see it, every human being needs therapy, unless you've been raised by people who got therapy and resolved all their issues before they made you. And that's nobody.
Well, even then, the human being is so complicated that a small set of twisted circumstances might lead.
Yeah. You could have the perfect parents, but because you're in this weird environment, you're in a really weird world. Like it's very different than your parents. Of course, some of that nastiness can get in you because you know your parents are not going to lock you in a room. You might choose to go to school, or you're going to see other people, and then it's going to be a big shock for you. It can be. It should be, because your parents were so different. Anyway, yeah, you still might need therapy, even in that scenario I gave. Yes, I get that.
And therapy, when looking at this from the perspective of typical Muslim/Arab culture where it's very stigmatized. Pretty much the same kind of situation that prevailed in the West long ago before therapy became normalized. Therapy is much more than just going to a professional who might diagnose you with, oh, this person needs to go to the mental asylum, for example. That's not about it. Talking to a friend is a kind of therapy. Opening up and doing all sorts of activities that the therapist might recommend, you might actually end up doing that just intuitively by looking into yourself introspectively and trying to see what.
Although I gotta warn people, be careful trying to treat your friends as your therapist. There's this concept of trauma dumping. Don't trauma dump on your friends. Like your friends didn't what's the word to use? They didn't buy into the idea of being your therapist. So don't treat them like a therapist. Unless your friend did do that. Your friend might actually be a therapist. In that case, it's very different. But
right. Yeah. I mean, probably you would be able to make a judgment call whether you're straining that relationship or overdoing what you're not supposed to be doing. And I mean, it's very hard to give a general directive, especially again, following up on that as to emphasize the disclaimer on our end that we're not experts in psychotherapy to begin with. We're giving this from the perspective of people who, if we want to include therapy, that who have gone through therapy, who have gone through a process of recovering from religion and sharing our ideas.
But I've done stuff that, okay, let me tell you a few things I did. I helped my mom go from when she would smell her mom's perfume and then go through she would start crying. And this was years after her mom died. And I saw that and I thought, something's wrong here. Doesn't make sense that you would still be crying about this 3 years later after your mom's death. And I said, can I help you? Can I show you what's going on here? Like, let me help you. And I had just I don't remember if I did it for her or I made a model of the mind on paper, a flowchart. And she pointed at it. She goes, why is that happening? What I was saying was something in your subconscious comes to your conscious, and it's not something you chose. It's a trigger. Some sensory data came in. In her case, it was smelling her mom's perfume. And then there was a trigger. And after some discussion with her, I found out what it was, and I helped her realize it. And then she was never sad like that again. And it was something very basic. She blamed herself for the way her mom died and the pain she went through at the end. And she wasn't to blame. And I convinced her of that. It was that simple. And there's another person I helped do this with. He was an employee of mine. And what happened was, so we're in the car. Some music comes on. I notice a weird face he made. And so I asked about it. He said it was a quick anxiety attack. And he said that song reminds him of his friend who killed himself. And it came out that he thought he's to blame because what was it? That friend had called him the day before he killed himself. And he didn't reply. He didn't call back fast enough. Mm-hmm. And so he blamed himself. If I had called back fast enough, he would still be alive. That's the thinking. And I helped him get out of that thinking. And now he can enjoy, he told me later, he can enjoy that song now without having any anxiety or panic attack. So I think I can do some psychotherapy. I mean, I'm not using a method that anyone else taught me. Well, I guess actually technically I am. I was using the Socratic method. Socrates taught me. By the way, that's what the psychotherapists say they're doing. The Socratic method. of course, they're adding onto it. They have some thoughts and questions and ideas that Socrates didn't know, but it is the Socratic method that they are using. It's just with some more specific questions, and my questions are different than theirs. It's still the Socratic method, still does the same damn thing. So in a sense, I am an expert. Anyway, we'll be talking about what epistemology is, or like the main ideas, and then we'll talk about the journaling, how to do it, the purpose, and the method. And then I want to talk about some actual therapy you can go get from an ex-Muslim therapist, and they have more than one therapist in this group.
Yeah,
Jabi. Zara is, I think, the person that started it, runs it, and so that's it, I guess. That's it, everyone. Usama, please stay on for a couple more minutes so we can plan some things. Bye, everyone.
Okay, goodbye.
All right, so let's see.